My name is Tom Kahn, and as a JDCA board member and a chair of the policy committee, welcome to the Jewish Democratic Council of America's 5th community briefing on the crisis in Israel. Before we start, just a quick second to celebrate the Democratic victories across the country yesterday in several states. As the war between Israel and Hamas continues, JDCA has become the address for convening Jewish voters who share our deep concern about rising anti-Semitism and Israel's security. And we are grateful to the thousands of you who have joined us. Today, we will be hearing from House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries and New York Governor Kathy Hochul, two remarkable leaders who are working every single day for the American people and who have demonstrated their commitment to Israel and to the Jewish people. Throughout his career, Leader Jeffries has been an extraordinary legislator. He's passed important bills to help the American people, and he's killed the bad ones that hurt them. I first had the privilege to meet the leader when he was a freshman and joined the House Budget Committee where I worked. And from his very first day, it was clear to everybody that this guy was a rock star headed for great things. Just as an example, his very first year, he led the drive, a successful drive to stop Republicans like Paul Ryan from destroying Medicare by privatizing it. And on issues of concern to the Jewish community, like anti-Semitism, Israel, and democracy, we could not have a more loyal, stronger friend. He's visited Israel 8 times so far. In fact, one more trip and they may put him in the army. That horrible October 7th, when all of us were in such a shock, these were his words to Israel and the Jewish community. I promise I've got your back. Hakeem feels those issues deep in his kishkis, and yes, he knows what that word means, kishkis. He's also committed to a 2-state solution, and he's dedicated to protecting the lives of all innocent civilians, including Gazans. Today, JDCA is doing everything we can to make Hakeem Speaker in 2025, and it will happen. I was going to introduce him. I'm not sure if he's actually with us or whether I should turn to Susie Stern and then introduce the leader. Then it gives me great pleasure to pass the baton on to my colleague and board member for JDCA, Susie Stern, and I know the leader is going to be joining us momentarily. He's in a meeting with some of his colleagues in the Capitol as we speak. Susie?
Thank you, Tom. I think all of you have learned, if you've been part of these programs, that we have to punt because our guests are so busy, and we're doing the best we can. But I'm Susie Stern, and as a JDC board member and chair of the program committee, I want to thank you for joining the Jewish Democratic Council of America's program today on anti-Semitism in Israel. Amid the darkness and profound grief of the past month, there are still reasons for hope. And we at JDC are incredibly grateful for the staunch leadership of President Biden and Democratic leaders like Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer. We're also grateful for the more than 2,500 of you who have joined our community briefings. You have also taken action with JDCA by sending more than 360 letters to Congress calling for Jack Lew's now successful confirmation as U.S. Ambassador to Israel, and we're thrilled about that, and also writing letters for increased aid to Israel. And we have heard directly from elected officials and policy experts who've expressed their gratitude for what they continue to learn from our programs and for JDCA's leadership, especially during this crisis. And to all of you, from all of us, we say thank you for standing in solidarity with the work of JDCA and for taking action with us to support Israel and combat anti-Semitism in this most shattering times. Our next guest is a leader who, like President Biden, has always stood with Israel and American Jews. Since being sworn into office in 2021 as New York's first female governor, Kathy Hochul has established a bold vision for New York's future, including historic investments in healthcare workers, small businesses, working families, infrastructure, education, and workforce development. Weeks before the war in Israel even broke out, Governor Hochul was already taking action to stand with the American Jewish community. In September, she announced comprehensive state action to fight anti-Semitism, making New York State the very first state to respond to President Biden's national strategy to counter anti-Semitism. She also announced the creation of New York State Anti-Hate and Education Center, an annual convening that will combat hate, create a safe and inclusive environment, and focus on eliminating anti-Semitism. Since October 7, Governor Hochul has increased security at Jewish sites around the state. And within days of the barbarous attack on civilians in Israel, she went to Israel in a powerful and meaningful act of unity, where she met with the families of the hostages, citing her overwhelming need to show solidarity with Jews across the globe. What you may not know is that shortly after arriving in Israel, Governor Hochul was informed that her beloved father had passed away. She made the decision to continue her trip because she felt it so important to meet with the people who had endured such unspeakable horror and determine how she could best offer support. Additionally, after the anti-Semitic threats were made at Cornell University, Governor Hochul arrived on the campus immediately to address the situation and stand in solidarity with the Jewish students and faculty. I can't thank you enough, Governor Hochul, for all you have done for the Jewish community and for the state of Israel. Your moral clarity and leadership during these very difficult times is deeply appreciated, and we're grateful that you have joined us today. I now want to pass this over to JDCA's CEO, Haley Soifer, who will moderate today's discussion. Haley.
Thank you so much, Susie, and thank you to Governor Hochul for joining us today. Governor Hochul, it has been just over a month since Hamas launched its horrific and barbaric attacks on Israel, and we know you've been to Israel since then and have taken action across New York to combat anti-Semitism. New York is the largest Jewish population of any state in the country. How has the crisis in Israel affected the Jewish community in New York, and what is your message to American Jews at this difficult time?
Well, thank you for the question, Susie, and everyone involved in allowing me to present to you, speak to you today about what I've seen, what I'm feeling, and what I'm hearing from Jewish New Yorkers. There's a lot of pain out there. There is a strong sense of betrayal, number one, because as I have pointed out in countless speeches since I arrived back to all groups, and not just in the many synagogues I've visited, even as recently as this past weekend, I'm telling everyone, reminding everyone that Jewish Americans, Jewish New Yorkers have stood for progressive causes from the beginning of time. I mean, they were there on the civil rights marches. They were there in the anti-war demonstrations. They were there to help with LGBTQ rights, which started right here in the state of New York. They've been there to support the Asian community when they were under attack during the pandemic after Donald Trump called it the China flu, and there was all these horrific attacks going on in our city. And they stood there during the George Floyd protest to show their solidarity. And at a time when they should be on the receiving end of that kind of support from all the other alliances that they've stood with for many decades, there's a strong sense of betrayal, a sadness, a sense of loneliness that we're in this alone. And that pains me deeply as the leader of this great state. And it's something I said I went to. We can talk more about that. I know you have some questions, but that if you want to know the state of mind for Jewish New Yorkers right now, it is not good. There is a sense of fear walking down the streets, sense of fear going into a synagogue, dropping off your child at yeshivas, and just this anxiety that's, you know, what about our loved ones back home? I mean, there's a 1 degree separation between New York Jews and connections to Israel, and it's profound. So that's the answer to that question. It is deeply troubling. Huge rise in anti-Semitism. I tracked the numbers. I had my public safety briefing again yesterday. It is very disheartening to be Jewish in New York State at this time.
One of the places where the rise of anti-Semitism has been most visible is on college campuses. In recent weeks, universities in New York, including Cornell, NYU, Cooper Union, and Columbia, have seen volatile episodes of anti-Semitism. Jewish students were threatened and have been harassed. What steps is the state of New York taking to help ensure the safety of Jewish students? And what is your message to Jewish students and parents who are concerned about the rise of hate?
Well, they need to know, first of all, that I, as governor, know that my number one responsibility is to protect New Yorkers, especially those who are being targeted right now, which are Jewish students on college campuses. I'm a mom too, so I understand, the common anxiety that any parent has in leaving their child, especially an 18-year-old perhaps dropped off just a few months ago for the first time ever. I know that fear exists under ordinary circumstances, but when I came back from Florida, my father's funeral, as I was unpacking, I received word of what happened at Cornell University just a week ago, and I called up the president. I said, I'm coming in the morning, we'll have breakfast, and we're going to sit down with those students. And to me, that was not even in question. I would go there, I would show up, sat with about 25 students at the Center for Jewish Living. What I had a chance to also do was let them know that I was leaving the state police in charge of their safety. As it turned out, the captain for that region was Jewish himself. He had family in Israel, and he sat there and spoke. When he sat there and talked to them, they understood he had a connection to them as well. I promised those students, number one, I would find the perpetrator, the person who put out the horrible, distressing messages on social media, not just expressing freedom of speech, but also putting real threats out there and calling on other students to literally follow Jewish students home from class and slit their throats. I mean, it was that direct, and it was so egregious. So I sat in comfort of these students, said I'll give them money for security. What do they need? Literally within days, we had more security cameras put there. And I also made a major address the following day. That was just Cornell, but I said we have to tackle anti-Semitism on all of our campuses, especially in our public institutions, State University of New York, the City University of New York. Those are the places where a lot of this is festering. I announced that I was convening a group of individuals led by very distinguished jurist Jonathan Littman, who had been the chief judge of our Court of Appeals. He is undertaking a review of anti-Semitic policies and activities, and formulating policies that we can be using throughout our university system to address this and say there are consequences. You cannot hurt, even verbally, if not physically, another human being, and certainly not in this time of heightened anxiety when there's literally death threats. So we're working on that. I put forth a package of $75 million toward public safety, part of it for campuses, about $50 million for local law enforcement, $25 million for ensuring that places are safe with security guards, with the surveillance cameras, any way we can keep track of people, let them know if you do this, you'll be caught, and there are consequences. So those are some of the steps we took in the immediate aftermath of this rise of anti-Semitism, as well as calling it out. Speaking, I convened all of our university presidents, said no tolerance for this, whether it's the students or the faculty. And I want to also question, when faculty are being hired, are people checking their social media posts in advance? I mean, I do as an employer. I check and make sure someone has not said something that's egregious or hateful to others before they become part of under my employment. So there's a lot we can do, but talking about it frequently, keeping it alive, and not letting this be the old news as another story pops up and captures the attention of the media. I'm going to keep this alive because this is causing pain to New Yorkers, and I'm going to continue to stand up and speak out against it.
Thank you. As Susie mentioned, you traveled to Israel in the aftermath of the horrific events of October 7th and demonstrated your solidarity with Israel and the Jewish community. Please tell us a little bit about your trip, and specifically what conversations, experiences, or images have stayed with you.
Well, so many have stayed with me, and I guarantee they'll be with me for the rest of my days, because it was so profoundly shocking to see, just literally few weeks after the atrocious attack on innocent civilians. And I keep saying that because when people try to create this equivalency between what Hamas did in targeting infants and children and young couples and grandparents, that was targeted. That was not collateral damage of in a military response, which has happened. It happens when we tried to take out bin Laden and Al-Qaeda, and all after we were attacked on 9/11, we felt we had a right to do that. You try to minimize civilian casualties, but what Hamas did was not in that category. What Israel's response is an obligation they have to their people to protect them from future attacks. And in one sense, containing this rise in terrorism, whether it's Hezbollah, whether it's Hamas, we're better off as Americans to have that contained and dispelled and destroyed right where it started. So I went there to talk about tell you what I saw. It's still hard to talk about, to be honest with you. It's still hard to describe arriving there, going right to the site of a makeshift refugee camp for people who had been displaced from the various kibbutzes that had been destroyed, literally flattened. I saw it with my own eyes. I went into one room and met the families of those who had been either killed or taken hostage. A young man told me that his 4-year-old, his 8-year-old, his 10-year-old, and his wife were all abducted. He has no idea whether they're dead or alive. And even a little 4-year-old who came running down the street after she saw her parents killed in front of her, took refuge with this family. That little 4-year-old is also a captive and no one knows her whereabouts. Talked to another man who told me that he was in San Francisco when the attack occurred. He's about my age. He was visiting the first grandbaby, and should have been such a joyous occasion. And he got word of what happened, and his wife and his son, who stayed behind, were found slaughtered in an embrace together, trying to protect each other. And so I heard those stories. I saw also the incredible outpouring of support for these individuals. There was an enormous room the size of a ballroom. It was filled. It was like a discount shopping store. There were sneakers all laid out in different sizes, and backpacks and socks and underwear and baby carriages and everything that people would need. So I want to say everybody who participated in sending support there, I saw it. These people at least felt that they could have the dignity of some clean clothes and a new toys for their kids. But it was also so heartbreaking to see when I walked into this area. There was an eraser board with all these numbers and letters on it across. A grid was created, and that was the number of individuals who had died from that one area. And these were the funerals, and this were the names are being crossed off as each person's family was sitting Shiva, and it's just hard to describe. It was painful. That's literally after flying through the night and arriving there. That's the first images I saw. The next day, I went to the wall because I had learned of my father's passing. I literally talked to him the night before from the JFK airport. I was debating whether I should call him because you don't want your 87-year-old father to worry about his daughter. And I thought, I'll be back in 36 hours. I'll be fine. But something told me to call him. And I spoke to him, and he later left a voicemail that I listened to later. He said, Dolly, called me Dolly since I was a little girl. Dolly, I'm really proud of you for going, but keep your goddamn head down. And I laugh about that and realize he wanted me to be there. And so when I heard about his passing, instead of leaving as had been suggested, I said, no, I'm going to the wall. It was a lot of security around there. People weren't sure it was safe to go to, but I went and put in a message for the Jewish people of Israel, to pray for peace for them, and also for my father. My father had gone to that same wall a few years earlier. It was on his bucket list, and he wanted to go there as well, and he did. So that was hard, but I was able to process it very quickly because I knew that I couldn't wallow in my own grief because it was an entire country of people grieving. And I was sent there as arriving right as Joe Biden was leaving to comfort a nation in any way I could. So we left, we went and talked to people in the hospital. The stories in the hospital where it's just, when you talk about what gives you hope, the medical care these individuals received who had been killed, a lot of them are injured during the concert. There was a lot of young people there who were just dancing and enjoying fellowship and having a wonderful time. And I talked to a young man and a 19-year-old soldier who had killed 4 terrorists when he went to help bring others to safety. But he was very, very wounded, almost didn't make it. And his mom was there, and he was had such a beautiful spirit about him. And he would have done it all over again, even though he suffered these horrible injuries. So I had talked to other people in the hospital, and a young couple, the young soldier was left for dead. They brought him back. He was on life support. And his young wife rushed back from where she had been down in the South and she wanted to deliver her baby in the same hospital where her husband dies, except he didn't die. They were able to bring him back. It was incredible to see the baby pictures and talk to him and talk to her. So to the medical teams, my gosh, they were extraordinary. So I left there and I went to meet the political leadership. I met Prime Minister Netanyahu, President Herzog. When I was with President Herzog, I showed him a photo of Omer Nutra, a young man from Long Island. His parents had given it to me the couple nights before when I spoke at a large rally here in New York. And I wanted to say, this represents the other hostages. You know, we have to do everything we can to bring them home. There's Americans, there's people from 25 countries, there's people from Israel. We have to fight to work together to get them home. So I sat there and spoke. I spoke to the military leadership, foreign minister, and then we went on the journey that I'll never forget. We went into a vehicle. It looked like an ordinary Audi, but it was an armored vehicle. I was told to stay in my vehicle, especially if the sirens go off, as we headed south. We ended up within a mile of Gaza. I could see the smoke in the distance. I can hear the gunfire still, and was escorted by the foreign minister through what had once been a beautiful way of life, the communal existence, as I just tried to describe when I came back to people here who were not familiar with the kibbutz. I said, these would have been our hippies. These are the people that wanted to have a peaceful life, a coexistence. And they're also involved in supporting the people of Gaza, the Palestinians. Some of them, one woman who had been kidnapped was the one who was in charge of raising money every single week. And she'd send money over to help the Gaza children because they had good hearts. I mean, they're peace loving. They wanted to, just do the right thing. And I walked into these homes that were literally just, picture a building that's just collapsed. You walk in, you're stepping over the rubble, you see the blood on the floors, you see the blood on the walls, you see the blood on the mattresses. Someone describes what happened to the family, a family of 4 slaughtered here. This safe room, every one of them had a safe room, which were all compromised. 2 young women that were butchered and shot and burned. One story I'll leave with you. There was one family that every year after Sukkot, they gathered everyone they knew and they had this great celebration, and they would fly colored kites over the wall into Gaza as a sign of peace, that we're here as, a shared humanity. And they would do that at 4:00 on what would have been, later that day on October 7th. So the kites were in the room, but by 8:00 in the morning, the family was brutally murdered, and the kites were on the floor covered in blood. Tremendous symbolism for me. As I stepped back out of there and did a press event and saw more images, but I think those are the ones that'll stick with me forever. The pain that the country was in, the strengths of resiliency, some hope, a lot of sadness. That's my takeaway from the trip.
Thank you so much, Governor, for sharing those reflections on your trip, and our condolences to you on your loss. It does sound quite meaningful, the honor in going to the wall, thinking of your father. And we appreciate your leadership. We hope you can stay with us for a moment, because we do have Leader Jeffries, who is popping in briefly between meetings, and we're so grateful. So we don't want to miss the opportunity to hear from him, and then we hope to go back to the governor. Leader Jeffries, you missed the very warm introduction given by your friend, our board member, Tom Kahn, but we are grateful for your leadership. We know you're fighting every day in the House for our values, and we appreciate your partnership with the Jewish community. So thank you. Over to you.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the kind words. Thank you, Tom, for your incredible friendship and partnership and mentorship throughout the years from the moment that I first arrived in the Congress. And I want to thank all of you for your incredible advocacy and support, particularly during this incredibly fraught, difficult time. My apologies, Governor Hochul and I are working on changing this, but we don't control the schedule on the House floor just yet. But with all of your help, we should be able to get that turned around and have more ability to dictate when we are off of the House floor. Let me thank Governor Hochul for her incredible leadership, for the way in which she is managing the state of New York during a very difficult time, for the solidarity that she has shown on behalf of the state of New York with Israel, her acknowledgement, as we all are endeavoring to do, of the special relationship between, of course, the United States and Israel's unequivocal right to defend itself, particularly in the context of the brutal atrocities and terror attack perpetrated by Hamas on October 7th. We are going to continue to do everything that we need to do in Congress to make sure that we are supporting Israel in its time of need. Friends should be there for friends at all times, but particularly when friends are in crisis. And we know that this is a moment of crisis, and we want to get to a better place. At the same time, what we have seen, and I appreciate the governor's leadership in this regard as well, a deeply disturbing rise in anti-Semitism on some college campuses across the country and in society generally. And all of us are going to be called upon to speak with moral clarity that anti-Semitism in any way, shape, or form is completely unacceptable. It is unconscionable, and it is un-American. And we need to meet it forcefully wherever it may be found. And as a Congress, we're going to continue to work to speak in a strongly bipartisan way to do just that. We're working with the administration in particular to ensure that the resources and the support are available to Jewish communities all across America and on college campuses. No Jew anywhere in this world, certainly not here in America, should feel unsafe. And I know that for many of my Jewish brothers and sisters, there's been a feeling of deep anxiety, deep concern, and lack of safety given the events that have taken place. And that should disturb everyone. And I know it disturbs Governor Hochul, certainly disturbs me. And we're going to work to make sure that we decisively confront this challenge. The college campuses, in gathering places, in Jewish communities, in shuls, in synagogues, in yeshivas, all across the land. And take this moment as an opportunity for us to decisively bury and crush anti-Semitism into the ground. And it's not simply the responsibility of Jewish leadership to do it. In fact, it is our responsibility to stand with the Jewish community during this time, as the Jewish community has done for so many other communities across time here in America and beyond. Last observation that I'd make, as Tom knows, I've now been to Israel 6 times as a member of Congress, 7 times in terms of my initial trip in the Assembly. And we have consistently defended the special relationship that exists between Israel and the United States based on our shared democratic values. That's incredibly important. And our shared strategic interests. That's incredibly important. But I think the horrific events of October 7th serve as another reminder that Israel's right to exist as a Jewish and democratic state and as an ancestral homeland, as a safe haven for the Jewish people, is of particular significance. When the Jewish community, for thousands of years, has been ejected from country after country after country, dealt with poisonous anti-Semitism in Europe and beyond, has had to deal with pain and persecution and pogroms, and of course, the horrors of the Holocaust, an unspeakable, unthinkable crime against humanity, that in that context, Israel doesn't exist in a vacuum, that Israel exists as a safe haven for the Jewish people, always and forever. There's a moral case, in my view, in my humble opinion, that we need to perhaps more forcefully make for the role that Israel has in this world. One state amongst hundreds, the size of New Jersey, as a safe haven for the Jewish people, given all that the Jewish people have faced. And I will continue to articulate that. I believe in it. It's the right thing for America. It's the right thing for Israel. But above all else, I believe it's the right thing for the world. And so I thank you for giving me the opportunity to briefly interject. Thank you, Governor Hochul, for your friendship, your support, for your leadership, and for your grace. And now, as we say in Washington, I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you so much, Peter Jeffries. And we know you have to get back to the House floor, and we are grateful to still have the governor with us for a few more minutes. So Governor Hochul, if we'd love to hear from you, and you mentioned this a bit, but some messages of hope. What gives you hope for the future, either in New York and or in Israel, and what more can we be doing to support your efforts in this moment?
Well, I appreciate that so much. And, what gives me hope is not just what I saw in Israel, the spirit of resiliency and the strong sense that they will persevere through this, as they have through many, many historic, I would say, setbacks. It's hard to describe this as a setback. This was a massacre, but they've been through so much in Israel. But it also bringing back that sense of hope here in New York is my responsibility, to try to bring together the voices that right now are shouting past each other, and there's such hatred and venom. And I do believe that this rise was really unleashed with the election of Donald Trump. I think no one would say that anti-Semitism is a new phenomenon. It's been there for thousands of years, but I've been tracking the rise of hate crime incidences. I have a state police unit that's targeting this, and we monitor on social media. And I just got a report yesterday. It's up over 300% over last year, which was an historically high year last year. So I see all this happening, but I also know that there's voices that are people that are willing to come together from different faiths. And I call on other faith leaders to help stimulate this conversation and this more understanding. And whether it's not just in congregations, but what is happening on college campuses. And I left this with the students at Cornell. They said, perhaps this happened to you because you've been chosen. You are the ones who are the ones that'll be the voices that can talk about the Jewish values and the contributions and why it's so important that people have their free exercise of religion without fear, but also say that other faiths also should not be in fear, that there can be an opportunity for Jewish and Muslim students to come together on campuses and give the example to the rest of the world, to the adults outside of campuses, of what that can look like. Otherwise, we're going to have a generation of students that are fostered in this atmosphere of hate on their campuses. And I don't know that that's going to dissipate in their early adulthood or as they go through life later. And they will be our leaders. That's what scares me. But also let us look for that kernel of optimism, that sometimes the pendulum swings so far in one direction that does come back. And those who are older Democrats know what I'm talking about. I mean, there was this disintegration of confidence in government after Watergate even, and people thought that this was the end of government. And we saw after January 6th, the same kind of attacks. But I do believe that there's this spirit that we must come together and speak about how horrible it is what people are going through, but also believe that we can get to a better, safer, more normalized space again, and not let this define us, not let this define the people of today. I do believe we'll get through this. There's a strong spirit here in New York State, here in New York City, of people, the strong desire to support Israel, condemn terrorism. As I said before, people can criticize Israel's response after October 7th, but that doesn't stop you from also criticizing and condemning terrorism and Hamas and the anti-Semitism that's out there. They're not inconsistent. You don't have to agree with the Israeli government on everything or even how it's responding. But that doesn't mean that you can't stand up and have the moral courage to say, but we don't want terrorism to ever again rise up and attack innocent civilians. So that's a varied approach to it. You know, I'm telling you, I'm clear-eyed. I see what's going on now. I'm not naive, but I also have in my heart the knowledge that we always do rise up and get through this, especially in a place like New York.
Well, thank you so much for your demonstration of solidarity with Israel, your strong support of Israel and the Jewish community, and all the steps that you are taking to combat anti-Semitism at this difficult time. We deeply appreciate your leadership. Thank you.
Bye-bye now.
Thank you. I will now call on our Senior Director for Programs, Bobby Saferstein, to wrap up our program.
Thanks, Haley. And thank you to Leader Jeffries, Governor Hochul, and our co-sponsor, Jewish Women for Joe, and to the more than 500 individuals who signed up to join today's conversation on anti-Semitism and the crisis in Israel. In times like these, it is both easy and understandable to fall into despair, but we must not let that happen. Our Jewish tradition teaches that the best thing we can do in moments of crisis is to be in community with each other and to take action. And we're grateful to you that you've chosen to do so with JDCA. Please visit jewishdems.org to learn about all of the ways you can be a part of our organization's efforts, including attending events, briefings, and community conversations such as these, learning about our JDCA membership program, and by joining a state or local JDCA chapter or affiliate made up of grassroots volunteers like yourself. If yesterday's election is any indication, Jewish Democrats have a lot to celebrate and be hopeful for following wins in Virginia, Pennsylvania, Kentucky, and Ohio, to name a few. But the path to 2024 requires each of us to get involved and stay involved. So please join one of our state and local chapters and affiliates today. You can do so by filling out the form in the chat and to get involved with JDCA at the local level. Next week, JDCA is advocating for a week of action in solidarity with the people of Israel, the hostages held in Gaza and their families, and against the alarming rise in global anti-Semitism. Some of the ways you can participate with us include attending the March for Israel next Tuesday, November 14th, from 1 to 3 p.m. in the afternoon in Washington, D.C., organized by the Jewish Federations of North America and the Conference of Presidents. Thousands of Jews across the United States from political, religious, and ideological backgrounds, different backgrounds, will gather together. JDCA staff, chapter members, and friends will be in attendance and will be sharing more information on how you can join us soon. Gates will be opening at 10 a.m. And we encourage you to reach out to your local federation, JCC, or synagogue to find out ways of getting there that are being provided. So please keep an lookout for that more information coming soon. 2, please urge your members of Congress to fulfill President Biden's supplemental funding request for aid to Israel, Ukraine, and humanitarian aid. You can email members by filling out JDCA's action item, which is on our website and linked in the Zoom chat. You can thank your senator, number 3, for standing with Israel and the Jewish community, as Democratic senators have been united in their steadfast support of Israel in this crisis. You can find out how to do so with this action item at the link in the chat or on our website. 4, join JDCA in thanking Democratic leadership in the House, Senate, and White House for their strong support for Israel. Please click on the link in the chat to do so. And finally, please sign up for next week's JDCA community briefing on Wednesday, next Wednesday at 12 p.m., where we'll discuss the rally in Washington and talk about what comes next. We'll conclude today's program, as we do each week, by praying for an end to the war in Israel and Gaza and for the safe and speedy return of all the hostages taken from Israel. We continue to mourn the increasing lives lost across the spectrum and pray for a full recovery of all those in need of healing. And we pray that in this difficult period, that it brings about a new age of peace and prosperity for Israel, the Palestinian people, and for Jews around the world. Thank you all for joining us, and see you again soon, be it at next week's community briefing, same time, same place, or next Tuesday in Washington, D.C. for the March for Israel. Take care.